My name is Simon, and what I'm about to share changed my entire perspective on marriage, love, and myself. For years, I believe I was doing everything right, or at least enough to keep my marriage together. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I compromised, let things slide, and convinced myself that love meant making sacrifices. But then one day, I overheard something that shattered every illusion I had. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with, said something that made me question if any of it had ever been real. That was the moment everything changed. Looking back, I realized that if I had paid attention to the signs earlier, I might have saved myself from years of wasted effort. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about waking up, seeing the truth, and learning when to walk away. If I'm being honest, my marriage to Lillian didn't begin with love or even deep attraction. It was arranged. Our aunts were good friends and thought we'd make a good match. I didn't have strong feelings about it at the time. I wasn't the type to chase after romance, and Lillian seemed like a decent enough woman. She was quiet, polite, and carried an elegance that made her seem like she'd be a good wife. So, when our family suggested we meet, I went along with it. Our first meeting was awkward, not because Lillian was rude, but because we were two complete strangers sitting across from each other, trying to act as if something was there. She didn't talk much, and I wasn't sure if that was just her personality or she wasn't interested. But as time went on, we got used to each other. Conversations became easier, and we learned the basics. Our favorite foods, thoughts on work, and general views on life. It wasn't a grand love story, but it was comfortable. A year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand, emotional event, just a traditional wedding with family, friends, and the usual expectations. I had heard that not all marriages begin with passion, that love can be built over time. So, I told myself that as long as we respected each other and worked toward the same future, things would eventually fall into place. I won't lie and say it was perfect, but I thought it was fine. We had a routine. We weren't always fighting, so I figured maybe love would grow with time. Looking back now, I realized I was lying to myself. One evening, I came home from work exhausted and just wanted to change. As I walked past the bedroom, I heard Lillian on the phone. At first, I wasn't paying attention until I caught her saying, I'd never be with him again. She wasn't angry, just certain, like she had already made up her mind. My chest tightened. At first, I wasn't sure if she was talking about me, but as she kept speaking, it became clear. Something inside me just broke. I stood there, frozen. She was on the phone with her sister, saying that if she had the chance, she'd never be with me again. It wasn't just that she was unhappy. It was that she regretted being with me in the first place. That realization felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to walk into the room and ask her straight up what she meant. I wanted her to look me in the eye and say it again. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away, careful not to make a sound. I wasn't ready to face the truth. So I did nothing. I carried on as if I had heard nothing at all. But from that moment, everything changed. I started seeing my wife differently. All the little things I had brushed aside before suddenly made sense. She had always been distant, never really opening up unless I asked her something directly. I used to think she was just reserved, that with time, she'd get comfortable and let me in. But now I understood. She had never truly let me in, not even from the start. It wasn't just emotional distance. I noticed how she complained more than usual, how she seemed irritated by things she used to tolerate. It was like she was slowly pushing me away, piece by piece, and I had been too blind to see it. I didn't confront her about what I had heard. I wanted to, but something held me back. I wasn't ready to hear it from her directly, so I buried it deep inside and tried to move past it. But then one evening, everything became clear. I got off work earlier than usual. I didn't call to let Lillian know I was coming home. I never had a reason to. Our apartment wasn't far, and I was looking forward to lying down for a bit before dinner. When I stepped inside, I walked straight to the bedroom, and that's when I saw them. Lillian was in our bed, wrapped in the arms of another man. For a moment, my mind lagged behind reality. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me at first. Then something inside me snapped. I didn't think. I just moved. I lunged at him. I don't even remember my fist hitting his face before he could react. He scrambled back, panicked, trying to shield himself. He hadn't expected a fight. He struggled to free himself as I hit him again. Then, like a coward, he shoved past me, grabbed his clothes, and ran out of the room as if his life depended on it. For once, I didn't argue, because I already knew. I took one last look at Lillian, this woman I had worked so hard to love, to make happy, and in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "You're free to be with him, because this marriage is over." I turned to leave, expecting something, fear, regret, maybe even an apology. But no, instead of guilt, she was angry. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "You had no right to hit him." That was it. I gathered some of my things, just enough to last a few days. I left the house without giving it a second glance. I checked into a small hotel. The room was simple, but more importantly, it was far from her. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My thoughts ran over everything that had happened up until this point. And for the first time in years, I finally saw the truth. I had told myself that things would get better, that she would realize how hard I had tried. But she never would, and I was done waiting. I had tried, but no amount of effort could undo what had never been real in the first place. I reached for my phone, not expecting anything, but checked it anyway. No calls, no messages. She wasn't going to fight for this, wasn't even going to pretend to care that I was gone. The silence spoke louder than words, and I knew what needed to be done. If I had any lingering doubts about where I stood in her life, they died right then. I opened my browser, searched for divorce attorneys, and booked the first available appointment. I was done. I remember sitting across from my lawyer, barely listening as he went over the paperwork. My thoughts were elsewhere. The divorce was moving fast, and I didn't even consider the cost. It didn't matter. I refused to waste another second in a marriage where I was unwanted. When the confirmation email arrived, I exhaled with a sense of finality I hadn't felt in a long time. Lillian hadn't contested anything. That told me everything I needed to know. She wanted out just as much as I did. But in the middle of it all, I learned something that made my stomach turn. The man I had walked in on, the one I swung at in pure rage, wasn't just some random guy. He was her ex. The same ex she once described as toxic, abusive, and controlling. The same man she swore she'd never go back to. Yet, there she was, sneaking around with him behind my back. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. In the beginning, Lillian had painted this guy as a monster. She told me he manipulated her, disrespected her boundaries, made her feel like nothing. She had looked me in the eyes and said she was grateful for me, for the stability, the love, the safety. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought I was a safe choice. The man who would treat her right. The one who wouldn't hurt her like he did. But looking back, I started to question everything. If he was so terrible, why did she run back to him the moment she had the chance? Had she ever really left him, or had I just been the backup plan? The guy she settled for when she wanted comfort? The truth hit me hard. She never loved me. She probably liked the idea of me, the security, the way I bent over backward to make her happy. But love, that was never in the equation. And the worst part, I had seen the signs. They were right in front of me the whole time, but I ignored them. I convinced myself that love was something that grew over time, that if I was patient, if I just tried harder, she'd finally love me back. But love doesn't work like that. You don't have to convince someone to love you. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who genuinely wants to be with you. And yet, that's exactly what I had done. I had lowered my standards, accepted less than I deserved, just to hold on to someone who didn't even want to be kept. That realization stung more than the betrayal itself, because in the end, Lillian wasn't the only one to blame. I had done this to myself. I had chosen to stay blind when the truth was staring me in the face. And that was something I would never let happen again. When the divorce was finalized, I didn't waste time looking back. I moved on, rebuilt, put everything behind me. Months passed. Life moved forward. And then I started hearing things. Mutual friends told me Lillian wasn't doing as well as she expected. At first, I didn't care. Her life wasn't my problem anymore. But then someone mentioned that the man she cheated on me with, the man she left me for, was beating her over the smallest things. She had run straight into his arms, thinking she had won, that she had traded up, that she had escaped a marriage she never wanted in the first place. I won't lie, it caught my attention. This was the same woman who once sat across from me, telling me how toxic he was, how he used to yell at her, control her, break her down. And now, she was living that nightmare all over again. People expected me to feel something. Anger, pity, satisfaction. But I felt nothing. She knew exactly what she was walking into, and she did it anyway. I wasn't her husband anymore. And honestly, I didn't care. She made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Over a year later, life had moved on. And so had I. Then out of nowhere, a message popped up on my phone. Lillian. Hey, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but can we talk? I just stared at it. After everything, she had the nerve to reach out, like we were old friends who had lost touch. I didn't respond. I didn't care. But she didn't stop there. More messages followed. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I was selfish. I took your love for granted. You didn't deserve that. Please, Simon, just say something. I could almost hear her voice as I read her words, but they didn't stir anything in me. Back then, I would have done anything to make her happy. I spent so much time thinking, if I love her harder, if I try more, she'll finally see me. But she never did. And now she wanted forgiveness? I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because her apology didn't erase the nights I spent wondering why I wasn't enough. It didn't fix the damage she left behind. So I let her words sit there unanswered, just like she had left my love unappreciated. If there's one lesson to take from my story, it's this. Never settle for a love that isn't reciprocated. I spent so much time being a good husband, believing that if I just did a little more, she'd appreciate me. But love doesn't work that way. If someone doesn't genuinely want to be with you, no amount of effort will change that. I ignored the signs, telling myself things would get better. But I was only postponing the inevitable. Her lack of effort, her emotional remoteness, the fact that she never truly opened up to me. I convinced myself she just needed time. But deep down, she was never invested. And when people aren't invested, they leave, physically or emotionally. Looking back, I see now that I was the only one holding on to something that was never real. So if someone doesn't value you, walk away before they destroy you. Staying in a one-sided relationship drains you in ways you don't even realize. You lose yourself trying to make someone else happy. And in the end, they still leave. Or worse, they betray you. The day I walked away was the day I started to rebuild myself. And trust me, nothing feels better than finally putting yourself first.